a lot of challenges, particularly when we look at inequality around design, use of it, and impact, particularly in our developing world. Today, we are here to discuss, share what AidData and CDD have been working on around evaluating gender bias in AI applications. This is part of the Equitable Challenge funded by USAID and implemented by DAI. So to moderate today's event, we have an advocate, particularly for women, girls, and mental health. She's a broadcaster with over 10 years experience, and she is an actress and a musician as well. Kindly help me welcome Nkrumah Ado to moderate the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good morning. I hope everyone is feeling okay. So let's just dive straight into it. We're going to have our opening remarks shortly, but before we do that, let me tell you a little bit about the organizers of this event. So first of all, we have CDD. The Ghana Center for Democratic Development is an independent, non-partisan, non-governmental, not-for-profit research and policy advocacy think tank, advancing democracy, good governance, and inclusive development. For 25 years, CDD-Ghana has worked to complement the broader objective and the demand for public accountability. The center harnesses the power of evidence-based research, ideas, and partnership to encourage dialogue, inform, and influence public policy. So that's CDD. And then we also have AidData. So AidData is a research lab that's based at the College of William and Mary in Virginia. AidData is a leader in geospatial impact evaluations, which combine satellite imagery, machine learning, and traditional data collection to conduct rigorous evaluations of development policies and programs. AidData's Gender Equity and Development Initiative seeks to better measure and contextualize women's empowerment through the combined use of geospatial tools, on-the-ground data collection, and rigorous evaluation. So that's just a little bit of background for you. I think we're all ready to get into it. So I'd like to invite Dr. Edem Salome. She's the Director of Research here at CDD Ghana. She's going to give us the opening remarks.
Is that me? Good morning again to everyone, and good morning to our participants online. Do we have people online? Right. So I wanted to say that I thought human beings were still efficient, but I think the machines will take over. We apologize for the late start. Right, so distinguished guests, and on behalf of CDD Ghana and AidData, a warm welcome to you to this evaluating gender bias in AI applications using household data. Well, artificial intelligence is here with us, and as they say, AI is a technology that enables machines to simulate human-like cognitive processes and learning and reasoning and decision-making. Of course, as we all know, artificial intelligence is rapidly transforming how we do things, from healthcare, finance, education, media, and entertainment. Indeed, AI applications transcend various domains, ushering in a new era of efficiency and innovative solutions to complex problems. So understanding and addressing the implications of AI on our society is ever more imperative. As we integrate AI more into all facets of our lives, it's essential to critically examine its impact on different segments of our society, particularly on gender disparities. recent research has shed light on instances where AI systems inadvertently perpetuate ethnic, disability, and gender biases, therefore amplifying societal inequalities. Over the past year, AidData, in collaboration with CDD-Ghana, utilized geospatial data and the demographic health survey data, which is a DHS data, as its foundation, and has looked into the nuances of gender bias in wealth estimates generated by AI. The project team analyzed the intricate relationship between AI models, wealth estimates, and gender dynamics. They used AI's capacity to discern and classify to reveal biases that may lie hidden within the DHS data. Today's workshop will explore the interplay between AI, gender bias, and some of the tools needed to foster equitable and unbiased technologies. As you will see from the findings when they are presented, while AI models demonstrate their strengths and usefulness, any bias, no matter how small, can cast shadows on accuracy. The gender lens through which this project has been meticulously executed exposes the disparities that may evade conventional analysis. For instance, we noticed that the digital realm can mirror and amplify the inequalities ingrained in our societies. Gender bias insidiously woven into the algorithms that underpin AI systems. We also see, for instance, that models trained on male household data, and I'm getting into some of the findings here, consistently outperform their female counterparts. And I'm sure the findings will tell more, and I don't want to get into that. So to quickly conclude, it's our hope that this study is just the beginning, and I believe that the methods and findings presented today will lay the groundwork for others to continue by unraveling more questions and answers towards a future where AI's power is harnessed for the betterment of all, regardless of gender, and where AI becomes a driving force for empowerment rather than one that perpetuates disparities. So just to conclude and to say a big thank you to USAID and DRA's Digital Frontiers for funding this project. It's such an interesting time for us in Africa as AI has just caught up with us. We don't know what the future is, but I hope that these conversations that we're going to have here today would set the background and open more doors and avenues for us to get into AI as it should be done from outside of the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Salome, for that. So we're going into our presentations for this morning, and we have two. The first one is by Dr. Peter Techi-Pepra, and the second one is by Dr. Rachel Sayers. So I'll introduce the first one. The first one is on the latest Ghana Demographic and Health Survey DHS findings. And like I said, that's by Dr. Peter Techi-Pepra. He is the Director for Field Operations and Coordinator 2022 GDHS. And he's with the Ghana Statistical Service. Let's give him a round of applause as he comes to give us our first presentation.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, as it was indicated, 2022, we carried out a demographic and health survey. It's a study that we've been conducting in Ghana for some years now. And what I'm going to share is more or less a small aspect of it, which is the key indicator report. In total, in fact, we have about 17 chapters of this publication, which will come out in December 2023. But we managed to turn out this key indicator report, at least to feed into policies, health related especially, as, and I would say we managed to release it during the health summit. That's on the 5th of June. So we've already shared some interesting findings with the health sector. Please. All right. Okay, so my presentation has this outline. And with the background, I just want us to have in mind that DHS is population-related survey, population health-related survey. And so far as the one that we did in 2022 is concerned, it provides about 44 of the Sustainable Development Goals. So it is a document with rich data that is going to help Ghana to catch up or to give us updated records so far as health-related and then Sustainable Development Goals are concerned. And as the name implies, we are calling it Ghana Demographic and Health Survey. It tells us that other countries have been doing it. And globally, about 90 countries are all turning out figures from the DHS. And therefore, it has some international comparable indicators. In Ghana, there is the 7th round. It started in 1988. And we've done it in 93, 98, 2003, 2008, 2014, and the current one is this. In fact, it has had 5-year interval over the years. It's just the last one that we had about 8-year interval. It's coincided with the creation of the new regions, and therefore the sampling frame was distorted. Along the line, we were also preparing to carry out population and housing census. So at the higher level, the decision was, why don't we, so that we can have a better sampling frame for all the regions. Unfortunately, COVID in when we plan implementing it. So we kept on moving it till 2022 when we had the chance to do it. So far as DHS is concerned, we hardly go down to the district levels. We are always doing analysis at the regional levels. However, with the introduction of small area estimates and other new technologies coming up when it comes to data analysis, researchers can delve deep into it and have small area estimates so far as the indicators are concerned. Next, please. All right. A brief about the methodology. We relied on the 2021 population and housing as the sampling frame. And in total, we selected 618 enumeration areas. And within each enumeration area, we interviewed, or we selected 30 households and then interviewed them. And the target was on women in the reproductive age bracket. That's 15 to 49. Of course, women in terms of with men. So their counterparts were also targeted. But because of age differences in most of our cultural setup in relation to marriage, we targeted men 15 to 59. However, if one wants to carry out any analysis between 15 and 49, exactly as that of the females, it can be done. We took weight and height of women to measure nutritional status of women and children, likewise men. So measurement was taken, anemia testing was carried out, malaria testing of children under 5 also was part of the DHS. Data collection was between 17th October and January 14th, 2023. At the end of the day, this gives us an idea about the response rate. So whoever wants to really think about the reliability of the findings, this gives you a strong grounds for you to conclude that really we had higher response rate. All right. This gives us a picture of the fertility rate over the years. That's somewhere 1988, a woman in Ghana in the reproductive age bracket could have about 7 children in her reproductive lifetime. Of course, certain measures have been put in place, educating us on family planning, education, and so many factors have contributed to it. And now, fertility rate in Ghana is around 3.9 per woman cycle, so far as the reproductive age bracket is concerned. Next, please. We try to come up with teenage pregnancy across the regions. And we realize that it is at its peak in Savannah. Most of the northern regions recorded higher prevalence of teenage pregnancy. That's those 15 to 19 years, as against Greater Accra. Of course, Upper East recorded a bit low, but generally we have Savannah, we have Savannah, Ashanti, Northeast, Brown East, Oti, and then Western North. And if you look at it critically, these are regions with a higher percentage of rural population. Next, please. Relating it by level of education and wet quintiles, we also got to know that young ladies who have never been to school have high risk of getting pregnant in the age bracket 15 to 19 compared to those with secondary education. And relating it to, you could see that those in the higher quintiles have lower to those in the lowest quintile. This slide gives us an idea about how our wives, our women, our sisters, our mothers had services through antenatal health care. Ideally, a woman should fall throughout the 9 months period of carrying a pregnancy. And we all know the benefits. As they go, they examine, they are given certain vaccines, they are educated, counseled, and so on and so forth. And it has been something that the health sector has taken it up over the years. So if you look at that of 98, about 64% of women were having 4 or more, but out of education, advocacy, and other things, the percentage has increased to almost 88%. It tells you that now if you take 10 women who are pregnant, almost 9 utilize the healthcare, and its advantages are enormous. It reduces maternal mortality and its associated risk factors. And relating it to regional variations, you could see that where we have the red are the regions of less patronage. And you could see that Oti region, we have the savannah here, are areas that the women do not utilize these health care, either from a midwife or a doctor or whoever. It could be as a result of multiple factors. Maybe they are not closer to health facility, or they've not been educated well about the importance of the utilization of these antenatal healthcare services. We looked at another key indicator, which is births by skilled person. In other words, supervised delivery. Some years back, we used to have traditional birth attendants. At a point, the health sector tried discouraging it by training more community health nurses, midwives to step in because of the risk associated with delivery at home. And looking at the chart here from 88, a lot of work has been done from 40, and now we are talking about 88%. And looking at the regional variations, those up here, that's Upper East, Upper East, 98, Upper West, 91, and those in the blues are all above 90%. It tells us that the health sector is doing something which they need to be encouraged to do it more. I believe if one day we hear that we are somewhere around 100%, every woman delivers in a health facility, it will be fantastic. The use of contraceptive among married women. Of course, it's a bit dicey to hear that women get into marriage and are advised to use contraceptives, because most women aim at making babies. Even your parents, your grandmothers will be putting pressure on you. Hey, I'm waiting for my grandchild. But the importance of this one is about birth spacing, giving birth when you are ready. Okay? So usually when women get pregnant and go to hospitals for antenatal health care and so on and so forth, they are advised to think of adopting a preferred modern method when they make babies, and then stop and continue with making babies when they are ready. But it will interest you to know that when it comes to modern method, the patronage is relatively low. It's still below 30%. But if you look at the trend, we will tap our chest and say we've done something. Because looking at 1988, the deep blue, it was just 5.2% of women women in marriage who were using the contraceptive. And we've moved through 10 to 18, 2003 and 2008, I think it came down. I believe the Population Council also came in with so many policies pushing the agenda. And now we have almost 28%. There are some women also who are not comfortable with the modern methods. They use traditional method. When they think they will be pregnant, they will not get near their men. Or they will go for withdrawal or abstinence. And that's what we call the traditional method. Relating it to regional situations, you could see that Central Region, Ashanti Region, Bono, and Greater Accra are regions with women that practice the traditional method most. I don't know whether the health sector is still struggling to get women convinced about the importance of the modern method, or to diffuse their mind regarding the side effects. So there is something that if you are with the health sector, maybe you should look at how best we can strategize to get these women in the traditional methods into the modern methods. The reds are people with no method. They are actively engaged, or they always engage in sexual activities, but they are not comfortable, or they are not ready to use a contraceptive. Now, the next one is about childhood vaccination, in other words, immunization. As a country, we are aiming at having 95% full vaccination of our children. If we say full vaccination, BCG, Penta family, the polio family, throughout the period, more especially for children not the zero. Zero is when you start giving or taking the BCG, but it runs through, you are expected to be given all these within the 23-month period. Ghana was performing well up to a certain point, and we've also seen some decline in the figures. Climbing up is a bit difficult. So the question is, what's happening? And there are some women, or I'll say households, because we shouldn't blame only the women, both husbands and wives, who are not bothered about vaccinating our children. So we have about 2% of children in the country, less than 24 months, who have not been given any vaccine. And we need to trace them, find out why, and see how best we can save their lives. That's 12 to 23 months. That's the figure I was trying to figure out. And it is more prevalent, those who don't take it, in northern, for western, east. At least these regions, Central, Volta, Ashanti, Western, North, and they have been given full vaccines, or all the children there have been given certain amount of vaccine. We also captured malaria prevalence. I think over the years, a lot of noise have been made on malaria. We used to call the unit in charge as National Malaria Control Program. Now they are saying it is National Malaria Elimination Program. They have achieved something. Why am I saying that? They started introducing the use of mosquito bed nets, encouraging our wives, women, when they are pregnant, to sleep under the net with their children, and so on and so forth. Now, we did 2 tests, a rapid diagnostic test on the field, to check whether the children had malaria, of which they don't know, or they had it and they were sick. And those, we had another one where we took blood sample to the lab, that's National Public Health Reference Lab at Kolebu, and it came out that 8.6% of children under 5 had malaria parasites within them. But if you relate that of 2002 to the previous, you could see that we started from 26.7. with their interventions and everything, we have now come down to 8.6. It's not eliminated yet, but something has been achieved. And I think if we intensify the programs and we in households also adhere to their advice, we may get closer to the 0-1 day. But it is at its peak in OT region and Upper West region. We also looked at exclusive breastfeeding. I think that one has been a hassle. Women are advised to breastfeed their children up to 6 months, that's exclusively, but it becomes always difficult, and somewhere 3-4 months, they will tell you we are now practicing what complementary feeding, that's combining the breast milk with other things, liquids and so on and so forth. So in 2008, we managed to get to 63%, but you could see that the figure is coming down, it's still hovering around 50. This gives us information about childhood mortality. And Ghana has also done well over the years from 1988. Under 5 mortality has reduced from 155 per 1,000, 40 per 1,000 live births. And then infant, which is usually death of children below or before they attain age 1, also has reduced from 77 to 28. And then neonatal, that's the most critical, death within 28 days, or they die before 28th day. It has dropped from 43 up to 17 per 1,000 live births. In fact, if we're able to control this as a country, then we are good to go. We are good to achieve our SDG targets that we set for ourselves. Apart from the SDG, Ghana also tried setting targets. For Ghana one, I would say we have achieved it, but it doesn't mean that we should relax. It could be that they didn't set more ambitious targets. Nutrition. With regards to nutrition, I would like to touch that's height against your age. Those children that are too short for their age is more associated with the kind of food that they eat or they are given. And not just the children, sometimes when their mothers are pregnant, the type of food the mothers eat have adverse effects on the fetus. The child is born, and if the child is not well fed, it affects that child as well. So that child will not be growing. And from the figures, we are still around 17.5. It means that if you take every 5 children under 5 years, one may be falling out of or falling under stunting. And it is more prevalent in the Northeast, and then certain part of Savannah. And looking at it by wet quintiles and education, you could see that those with a higher level of education, that is the mother's education, has positive impact on that. It tells you that it is important to educate our women, our young ones, so that they would appreciate, understand why there is the need for them to feed themselves well, especially during pregnancy, and likewise when they deliver, the babies should be taken care of well. They should be given all the vaccines and be fed well so that the children can grow and grow well. This gives us an idea about anemia. And we got to know that even though Ghana has performed well over the years from 2003 up to 2008, 2022, we still have a reasonable number of women, children, 6 to 59 months, who are anemic. And therefore, that one also has something to do with nutrition. If they are fed well, I think we can save a lot of lives and they can grow well. It affects their, so children that do not perform well in class, if one can take time and investigate, all these things could be potential factors affecting them. And looking at it by regional variations, Oti region, Upper West, Savannah, Northeast, Upper East, and Northern are the hard hit regions which attention must be paid to. HIV testing and sexual behavior. We try to figure out from our respondents, those who have ever tested for HIV for whatever reason. And it came up that most men have never tried going for tests. It could also be that the policy in place is more or less favoring women to know their status. Because usually when you get pregnant, throughout the period, among the tests that will be carried out on you, they will carry out HIV testing. It's a requirement by the Ministry of Health. And we, the men, like I believe even if we are ill and we are asked to go for tests, we will run away. And it's not helping us. And if you look at the variations in terms of regional variation, Savannah, Northeast, Northern, almost all, Greater Accra, more than 60% of men do not know their status. They've never done it. But the sad aspect of it is, if you look at men and women, the red and the blue, those who have ever engaged more partners is the men. Sometimes we brag. I've dated 20 women in my life. Then we are happy. You see? But there should be a policy that will encourage us to know our status. Maybe health people should come up with a policy where any man who goes with even headache or malaria, we will take a part of the sample and do HIV testing. And when we know it, it will also help us to what? Live longer, because you'll be on ART and other things and ensure that you live quality life. This gives us the age intervals of the men. And those 15 to 49, the variation is 2.8 against 1.9. But get to the latter part. Between 30 and 39 years, men have lifetime partners about nearly 9, women, that's men in this age bracket, and men between 40 and 49, also almost around the same, as against women, average of about 3. So in terms of policy, I will play it. Maybe CDD can take it up in a way. Other data will come, as I said, getting to the tail end of the year on women empowerment, domestic violence, and other things. In fact, we have about, as I said, about 17 topics from the DHS, which we can pick some, make noise, advocate on how best we can get the males at par with that of the women. We are talking about biasness in data. when it is about wealth, we always say men always claim more than the females. It could be that we do more research work in that area. There is also another area that we can do a lot of research and see how best we can put in the needed interventions to get men also abreast with some of these. Key takeaways, ladies and gentlemen, at least from the DHS key indicator report, we've got to know that as a country, we are making progress on some indicators. That's reduction in malaria among children under 5. That's malaria prevalence. Infant mortality is coming down, and under 5 mortality is also coming down. Skills-based attendance coverage has also improved drastically across all the regions, which is a plus. And there is the need to revisit strategies to encourage population in knowing our HIV status. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's Dr. Peter Techi-Pepra. Let me just ask you guys really quickly, how many of us know our HIV status? Right. Oh, wow. Okay. I think a few weeks ago, the Ghana Health Service introduced the quick testing, the one that you swipe your mouth and then 20 minutes, you know. I wonder what people 20 minutes. Are you sitting in your living room waiting for 20 minutes to know? But since it's accessible, I think the rest of us who don't know our status should get tested. So thank you so much for that. Dr. Peter Techi-Pepra, Director, Field Operations and Coordinator, 2022, Ghana Statistical Service. So will there be a period when you can ask questions down? You'll have the opportunity to ask all the questions that you would like to. All right. So let's move on now to Dr. Rachel Sayers. She's a research scientist with AidData, and she will be giving us a presentation on evaluating gender bias in AI applications using household survey data findings. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you. So over the past year, AidData has been in partnership with CDD to work on evaluating the potential of gender bias in wealth estimates generated using artificial intelligence, geospatial data, and the GJHS data. And this project was funded through USAID's Equitable AI Challenge and implemented through DAI's Digital Frontiers. So the work that I'm presenting today is grounded in the desire to understand whether gender bias exists in a common application of AI. We can think of artificial intelligence or machine learning as a computer learning from the data that humans give it. In other words, we provide data to a computer, it learns, and then it provides us with a new output which we can use later on. So how does bias emerge in artificial intelligence? Well, we think of it in two main ways. The first is if there's bias in the data collection or processing, which results in biased data that we feed to the computer. So obviously, if there's bias in the data we give the computer, then we might end up with a biased outcome. The second is if there's bias in the design or implementation of the AI algorithm. And just to note that the work we're presenting today is an effort to promote equitable AI. And USAID defines this as intentionally working to increase the transparency of AI systems in order to produce more equitable results. And a key piece of this is in order to produce more equitable results, we must know where the bias is occurring. So in this work, we're considering how gender bias might be present of poverty and wealth. As we know, wealth is a very important outcome that we consider in a lot of evaluations. It's important to understand how many policies and programs impact poverty and wealth. And this is applicable to a wide range of interventions, whether it be providing subsidies, providing vocational training, maybe installing new infrastructure. It's always an outcome that we want to monitor. But in addition, wealth and poverty estimates are very useful for targeting interventions in aid in the first place, so that we can ensure that programs and policies we're implementing are targeting the correct people. So how is poverty and wealth traditionally measured? Well, traditionally it's measured using household surveys. And these surveys operate by collecting information on income, assets, or consumption in order to estimate individual and household wealth. But as we know, these surveys can be very expensive because they need on-the-ground data collection. And in addition, they're very time-consuming. And so they're not done as frequently as we might like. So nationally representative surveys such as the DHS are done every few years. For the DHS, it's typically done every 5 years. This time the gap has been larger. So we don't have very frequent estimates of household wealth from these surveys. In addition, the surveys are conducted only in a subset of communities in order to make the survey nationally representative, or in some cases, representative. So if we want data on household wealth at a finer level, maybe at the district level or the community level, we need to look elsewhere. So researchers in this quest to find good, more frequent, finer and cheaper sources of household wealth data have looked at other models and other proxies. So for instance, nighttime lights is a proxy that is commonly used to understand household wealth. The reason for this is that satellite imagery is becoming cheaper, it's frequently observed and updated, and it's becoming higher resolution every year. And therefore it's become a popular way of estimating community level wealth. However, there are of course critical limitations, particularly in rural areas or areas that are not electrified. So to overcome this, researchers are increasingly using machine learning and artificial intelligence to create new measures of household wealth. And broadly, there's been a growing body of research on how to do this. And there's many new nonprofit organizations and profit organizations that are estimating household wealth in this manner to be used in various ways. So to develop these models, researchers give computers existing measures of household wealth for the computers to learn from. And the most common data source that's used for this is the DHS. But despite the fact that DHS is so commonly used for this, so far there's been no work that we're aware of to look at how gender bias might occur in these estimates. And so this is what we are interested in looking at. And it's important because we frequently use these measurements to estimate the effect of evaluations. But say we observe that an intervention increases wealth overall, we don't know how this is distributed through the community. So for instance, it might be the case that an infrastructure project greatly increased wealth in a community, but all that wealth went to men, and therefore the socioeconomic divide between men and women might have actually increased. So first of all, I would just like to talk about how the DHS data approaches wealth. So the DHS survey provides what's called the DHS Wealth Index. And this is based on a wide range of household asset measures, including things like electricity, members of the family per sleeping room, and then also ownership of goods such as radios and motorcycles and cars. So these measures are collected at the household level during the survey. And then the wealth index is created later on by weighting each individual asset in a way to aggregate it all together. And this is done in a way called principal component analysis. And it's important to understand that the weighting of the assets can differ slightly for people who live in urban versus rural areas, but it does not differ in other ways for populations. So it doesn't differ for male versus female households. It doesn't differ by region. It doesn't differ by ethnicity. It only differs by the urban-rural divide. So in this way, all the assets are kind of weighted equally for these different subpopulations. So the assets that are surveyed often differ across countries and survey rounds. And because they use principal component analysis to weight the individual assets, the resulting wealth index will always differ by survey and round. So for instance, the wealth index we calculate for Ghana in 2014 cannot be directly compared to Tanzania's wealth index in 2014. It can't even be compared to the wealth index we generate in Ghana in 2022. So as you can see, a critical piece of this asset-based wealth index is that it's based on household level ownership. And what really incentivized us to conduct this research was knowledge that men and women in households often have different overall asset ownership, and they often choose to spend their wealth on different assets. For instance, male-headed households typically have higher overall asset ownership and higher rates of assets such as farmable land, radios, and bank accounts. Whereas female-headed households have higher rates of assets such as sewing machines. So knowing that these differences exist, we wondered whether this introduced gender bias into the poverty estimates. So I'd just like to review how the AI algorithm produces the poverty estimates, and we'll go through the inputs, the method, and the output. So there's two essential inputs. The first is the survey data on wealth from the DHS. And this data is used because the DHS has high quality data on asset ownership. It's nationally representative, and also because the DHS records the survey location of clusters and shares that with researchers. And we need this location of clusters to get our second essential input, which is geographic features or characteristics of the clusters themselves. So in addition to the wealth information, you would give the computer the geographic characteristics of the clusters, which include things such as nighttime lights, land cover, population count, road networks, and building footprints, as well as a number of other inputs. So these inputs are given to the computer, and an AI algorithm is used to help the computer learn from these. Essentially, what the computer does is determine which features are related to wealth and in what manner in order to create a model of wealth based on graphic characteristics. This is how we get to our output. Once the computer has learned how the inputs relate to each other, it can then predict wealth based only on geographic characteristics for areas that were never surveyed as part of the DHS. So as we heard, there are many clusters, but they aren't all over the country. So we might have 600 clusters, but now with AI, we can give it geographic characteristics from the rest of the country, and we'll end up with a predicted poverty service across the entire country. So that's essentially how these poverty estimates work. So how do we evaluate gender bias in the poverty estimates themselves? Well, traditionally, we would feed all the data from all households to the algorithm in order to generate the poverty surface. But because we want to understand how gender bias might exist, we first must classify the data by gender. And then this will result in male data and female data, which we can run the same AI algorithms on, resulting in two separate models, one for females and one for males. So once this is complete, we can then compare the resulting models with each other on a number of dimensions. So the first dimension is accuracy. When we're doing this, we reserve 20% of the DHS data in order to cross-validate the model and determine the accuracy rates. So at the end, we'll be able to see whether female or male models are more accurate. And the second dimension is in how models utilize the geographic characteristics to predict poverty. So as we mentioned, we feed it the geographic information about the clusters, and then we can see how it uses these to predict poverty, and we therefore will know what features are used in each model and in what way. So we'll discuss the results on both of these dimensions, but first I just want to discuss how we go about creating a gender classification. So as we mentioned, the assets are measured at the household level in the DHS, and we don't know the asset ownership by the individual household member. So therefore, we can't separate the data by the gender of the asset owner, and instead we must find a way to classify households by gender. This, of course, is very difficult because households typically consist of members of both genders, and the assets and wealth of a household is a reflection of all the members of the household. So we concede there's no perfect solution to do this, and it's one of the main limitations of our work. But the way we tackle this problem is by using a number of different classification methods. And the hope of this is to create a robust result where we've tried a number of different ways. We find systematically the same results, and therefore we believe it's robust. So the first classification we use is by gender of the head of household. And the second classification we use is by the presence of men in the household. This is nice because it allows us to find households which we know cannot be classified as male because there are no men in them, and therefore they get classified as female. We then utilize a number of different classifications based on the ownership of specific assets. And these assets were chosen in partnership with CDD based on the local context in order to reflect assets that are typically owned by men or typically owned by women. And we also evaluated ownership trends in the survey data to look at this. So again, there's no perfect classification, but our hope is that by doing it with a number of different, we can come up with a robust result. So our first finding from this work is based on comparing the accuracy of the male and female models. We find that models trained on male household data more accurately estimate wealth than models trained on female household data. So as you can see in the graph, the accuracy of male models far outperforms the female models, and the difference is quite significant. We did multiple additional tests to consider whether these findings were driven by sample sizes. So one of your main concerns are that there's just more male households than female households in the data. And so these results might be driven by that sample size difference. However, by running our extra tests, we found that we don't believe that these results are driven by differences in sample size. And we believe that they're actually driven by differences in how the model performs based on gender. Our second finding is that for both male and female models, the AI algorithm largely used the same features to model poverty. For instance, average nighttime light, urban area coverage, and population were consistently the most important features for both the male and in general, the top 10 or so features used were the same between the two models. However, the in which features were used in each model. For instance, travel time to a major city was more important in female models. Access to urban resources is more important for female wealth accumulation than for male wealth accumulation. Similarly, rainfall was more influential in the male model than in the female model, and perhaps this is because agricultural wealth is typically more controlled by men. Finally, for our third finding, we return to the wealth index construction. So if you remember, the DHS wealth index weights assets the same for all households with only a respect to urban-rural divide. This made us concerned that the wealth index might have an inherent gender bias because men and women access to different types of assets or choose to purchase different types of assets. As such, we wanted to explore whether regenerating the wealth index weights using only gender-specific households would shift the overall distribution of the wealth index for households. So in order to do this, we split the households based on our gender classification, primarily using head of household. And we replicated the DHS methodology for producing the wealth index for just female households and just for male households. And this allowed the weights on to differ by gender. So assets that are more influential for female wealth could be weighted heavier in their model, and assets that are more influential for male wealth could be weighted more heavily in their index. So one of the most interesting results was that the female-specific wealth index classified more households in the poorest quintiles than the DHS wealth index did. So in other words, the DH wealth index typically classifies the poorest female households as richer than a female-specific wealth index would. On the other hand, the DHS wealth index classified the poorest male households as poorer than the male-specific wealth index. So what this means is a little bit unclear. Because the wealth index is calculated using this principal component analysis, there's no one absolute weight for each asset that we can say is true. But what is important from this finding is that there do seem to be differences in how assets are weighted if you make a gender-specific wealth index. And this results in different classifications within wealth index quintiles, and quite significant ones at that. So it's an important finding overall. So I do want to of our work. I've touched on them throughout the slides, but I would like to highlight some of the more important ones. First of all, we have imperfect gender identification and imperfect gendered asset ownership. Can't isolate assets or influence within a household to one gender, and we have to rely on the gender classification that I described before, which is a large limitation. Another limitation is that it's unclear whether we can clearly distinguish between gender and economic status. So female optimized models might actually be models that are optimized for poorer households. And if more female households are poorer, that's certainly important to know, but it might affect how we interpret this. And we might not interpret it as gender bias, but rather socioeconomic bias. Another limitation is the small gender sample size within a single survey or country. So a common way to deal with this is to group multiple countries together and do the poverty estimate across multiple countries. However, when you start doing that, as we discussed, the wealth index isn't comparable across those countries. And it also makes it difficult to do the local context of assets that we did in partnership with CDD. So that's something that could be done, but it's also limited. And finally, the biggest limitation is that it's difficult to isolate the why behind the findings. So we can see that the male models perform more accurately than the female models, but it's hard to say why. So this brings up a lot of new questions that hopefully will spur some discussion today. The first is, what makes a female household wealth more difficult to model? The second is whether there are other geographic features that can better explain variation in wealth beyond the ones that we use for this model. The third is whether surveys themselves can be improved to more accurately measure household member wealth. And the last is whether there are alternative wealth indices that are better for modeling wealth. So in this, we look primarily at the DHS Wealth Index, which is nice because it's constructed for us in the survey and readily available. But perhaps there are other alternative wealth indices that might be better for AI purposes. So just some conclusions. Overall, existing methods of using AI and geospatial data to estimate household wealth do not perform as well on female households. And there's also some difference in the geographic features that are used by male versus female models. And finally, we believe there may be some ways to improve the data that is given to AI models to improve results in the future. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I'm sure you have your questions because that was a very interesting presentation. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go into our panel discussion. And then after that, we'll open the floor for all your questions and your comments. So I'd like to invite all the members of the panel up into the corner. We have Mr. Selassie Akaho. He's a statistician with the GSS. Let's give him a round of applause as he comes up. And then we have Dr. Rita Udor, Gender Inclusivity Officer, REIL KNUST. Let's give her a hand. And then we have joining us on Zoom, Deborah Dorma Kanubala. She's a researcher at Saarland University in Germany. Okay, so she'll be joining us on Zoom, and I'll just slide over there into the corner. But let me start with your general. Selassie, what was your what did you think about everything? Or first about the research, and then also about the evaluations.
Okay, so I would say the research is a novel product that has come to the country, especially in terms of poverty assessment, wealth assessment. As a Statistical Service, we are also trying to generate certain models to do this, but we've had most challenges with what data do we combine to make meaningful sense and generate results. And I think this report coming up would somehow help in guiding what we are also doing, because it has a lot of insights. And even though some of the biases in the analysis are quite huge, I think with data we have available in our system, we can go around that and then come up with a more concise results and then generate something that's authoritative enough that the country can base its information or decisions on.
So you're going to let the findings inform how you conduct the data? The
research. So we've made some progress in our analysis, but then with this coming in, I think our team is going to then sit and look at what methodology they used, the limitations that they came up with, and then build upon that to improve what we are doing as well. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. Can we swap places though, so that I can see? Thank you so much. Okay, Doc, let me come to you now. Good morning. Thank you for being here. So your general comments as well about the presentation?
Yeah, I think the presentation, it was very good, especially as a gender and AI inclusivity officer. I'm always interested in what data are we using to model our AI, because we already know that our society have gender inequality, and AI has come to improve the lives of people. But then if we if we don't model, we don't use the right data, we are going to ensure that this same gender inequality is going on in our society. So it's very interesting that we are looking at the DHS data, because most of the time, there's the data we use. So if there are problems with how data was collected, then it's also going to affect what policies that comes out after that. So it was very interesting seeing that. On the presentation made by Dr. Rachel, when I also read the document, I was a bit, one thing that I was concerned about was on how you use ownership and control of asset. So as a gender expert, we don't just think about ownership, we think about access and control. And so your first question, I wanted to even the limitation on what makes female household wealth difficult to estimate. And this can be one of the reasons, because a woman can own an asset, but she doesn't have control over it. When we talk about control, we mean the ability to make decisions over those assets. And so the women can own the asset, but they don't have control over it. And this can actually influence when you are taking this type of data. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that. We have Seth Goodman joining us on Zoom, as well as Deborah Kanubala. So let me take some of your comments. Let me start with you, Seth. What did you think about all the findings that were presented here today?
Thanks. So in doing this work, we're really trying to open the door to.
Okay. So Seth is part of the research team. Hello.
Hi. So I could just say briefly, because yes, I was part of the team working with Rachel and CDD-Ghana. So I'll just say that in doing this work, we're really trying to open the door to support others who are also going to look into ethical AI and better approaches for producing poverty estimates in Ghana and other countries around the world. So I think what the other analysts have started to talk about, how we can address limitations in the future, are all exactly the kind of discussion points we're hoping to hear.
Thank you, Seth, for joining us. We also have Deborah Kanubala as well. Deborah, what did you think about the presentations? What are your general comments?
Okay, hi everyone, good afternoon. It's really a great pleasure to be joining you online. So mostly my research is on developing fair machine learning models. And just a minute, I'm getting a... Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. It's like I'm hearing myself again. All right, so I think this is better now. Yes, so as I was saying, I'm a PhD student in Saarland University, and my research it's involved in developing fair machine learning algorithms. And so this work in particular caught my attention, and I love the entire approach of illustrating or trying to showcase the bias in these systems, because most of the time, most of the bias or works that have seek to identify that bias has happened in a particular scenario has always been targeted at other data sets that are focused in European countries. So for instance, like the COMPAS data set that was used by the US court laws to identify that Black people were being predicted more to recommit a crime again or not. And I think that this data set in particular focused in a local context. And I think that was a very good initiative focusing on our local context. Aside that, I think that from the machine learning perspective, the use of random forest generally was a good approach, in the sense that random forest, as we understand, is an ensemble learning model. So what I mean is that it's more like a stack of different models together. So you can think about, let's say, a decision tree. So a decision tree, you have a case, so whether it's going to rain or not, and then you have a decision either as to yes or no, and then based on the answer, then you ask the follow-up question. Now, random forest is just a stack of these different decision trees put together. The good thing for random forest is that they allows you to be able to easily interpret your results. And I think right now, with the current state of the art in machine learning, this is extremely important for us to be able to easily interpret what results we have. And I think that this is an advantage that random forest itself provides for us. Secondly, I also think that the idea of training with different subsets of the data. So whilst reading the report, I understood that you had different features. You had features from NTL, you had OSM features, and geospatial data features. And you started by training individually of all of these features and then putting them together and training the model again. The good thing about this is that it allows you to be able, if it happens that you find one feature that uses less amount of features and another one that uses more features, and you get almost the same accuracy, then it probably makes sense to go for the simpler model, which in this case is the Occam-Reza, that we expect that explanation that requires fewest assumption is usually correct. So again, I think from that approach of using very few subsets of the data is, or trying to train with different subsets of the data was really a good initiative. However, there was something that struck my attention. Again, like I said, I'm mostly interested in developing fair machine learning models. And one thing that we understand is that during the entire development phase of a machine learning project, so you start from the data collection, you go to the data preprocessing, go to the model development, then you deploy your model, then your feedback. We understand that at every stage of this process, you can have some form of bias that is incorporated. Now, the beginning part of it, which is the data collection process, from the results of this report, we noticed that women were mostly identified, their assets, ownerships, and control were usually identified as owning things like charcoal, and men, on the other hand, were owning things like motorcycles, farmland. So they were owning more like really physical, tangible physical assets, where on the other hand, females were owning freedom or owning or controlling charcoal and other things. This is an example of what I'll call stereotypical bias, in the sense that there is this perception especially in our local context, because I'm Ghanaian as well, where we sort of sometimes put women in a certain place and men in a different place, like men own the household. And so what we saw exhibit is just a typical thing of stereotypical bias. And then when we come to a machine learning development phase, we have what we call the bias transforming and bias preserving. The question we need to always ask at this point is whether we want to transform our bias in the sense that we acknowledge that there have been existing bias that has happened. And now we want to acknowledge it and don't want to continue with let our model perpetuate the existing bias in the data set. And the bias preserving here is that we forget that there have been historical indifferences or discrimination that have occurred, but we put everyone on the same level and then try to just build a model that then tends to ensure fairness in that case. But I think this is something that going forward, we probably want to think about is how do we deal with these stereotypical biases in data sets of this sort? Because this is in the local context, this is what we have on the ground. But do we want this to continue? It's a question that we as education people, we as machine learning engineers, data scientists would have to all come together, collaborate, and think about the way forward. But all in all, I think that this work was a very good in exposing this situation of bias, gender bias that we have in our country. So that's pretty much what I have to say. MC, I'm muted.
We don't want people to know.
Development in
like we saw things about this maternal and child health. We saw all this data. We can use AI to promote better health services for women and girls. We can also, when it comes to even environment, we can also use the AI to predict the rainfall patterns, and even for farmers in rural settings, they can be able to use AI to help them detect diseases and also know the crops that can work better within the environment in which they find themselves. As someone who is more into gender and AI, I'm actually also interested in how we can use AI to solve some of the challenges that women face. One of the projects that we are working on is how we can use AI to help victims of gender-based violence. So as we already know, gender-based violence is something that permeates in our society. And one of the problems that people have is either reporting or also getting access to services when they have been abused. So we are trying to use AI to help some of these women also report. Reporting is not also an issue that has to do with only women. We know that in our society, we have this stigma attached to even people, or especially men, who report that they have been abused. Yeah. Exactly. So these are all areas that we can use AI to bring about development and change our society.
All right. Saarland, any ideas?
So I would say she has touched on most of just to add to what we say, she said I know we are trying to apply AI in studying mobility patterns in the country, as well as using that to support the health, especially when it comes to immunization of the measuring those dominated across the country. I know there's when to set up an emergency response where we are able to easily measure determine how we fall patterns and mobility where people are likely to be in case an incident happens within certain times of the day. Usually we entered the one part of during the COVID time, that's during the lockdown, to study whether the lockdown actually had effects or when people whether actually stay in their rooms.
Should they stay in France?
Oh, so we did a cross-country assessment, and we did within Accra and then the Ashanti region, and realized that usually people move from outside, let's say, Tema, that area to Accra Central Square, but in that period, there was no movement. So then, those models told us that those things were actually being effective. On our side assessment, we are trying to use AI to the data generate. So my colleague currently has worked on a model that can detect the response that so in case you go to someone and the person says I'm a crest taker, how do you associate that with a particular standardized tool that you can then compare the distance analysis? That's done nice. Well, yeah.
But the AI won't be able to tell us if the tailor or the dressmaker will have our clothes ready. No, that one we can't measure. That one we leave it to go. Well, thank you so much for that. Deborah and Seth, I'm not sure if there's anything you'd like to maybe add. Let me start with Deborah. What are some of the areas, especially in Ghana, Africa, that you would like to see us be more AI about?
Okay, so I think what I would mention, which is relevant for our country context, is with regards to health. So we have Mino Health, which is a company headed by Darlington Akogo. I'm sorry if the surname I didn't mention it correctly, but Darlington and his company is into using AI for health diagnostics. So what they do is that, I mean, in Ghana, particularly when you come to radiologists, the ratio of how many radiologists we have to the population we have is pretty low. And so they built this AI system that is able to take, let's say, scan of images. Let's say it's a breast cancer mammogram, and then it's able to tell whether this patient actually has breast cancer or not. And at least this helps you get your decision or diagnosis very quickly than to go to, let's say, the military hospitals to wait to see a radiologist that can take you probably months. So you already get early diagnosis, which I think it's a good thing, at least for status. I wouldn't encourage that, given the fact that not when it comes to AI in particular, AI has hallucination. So I wouldn't necessarily push that people should use AI to self-diagnose themselves, because these systems could also be wrong in to some extent, and health is really important. The other sector that I think is languages. So we have the Ghana NLP, Ghana Natural Language Processing, Ghana NLP that is into developing or building Ghanaian languages. And this is an association that is actually being led by a friend of mine, Salome Osei, and then Dr. Paul Azure. And they've been very focused on building languages, Ghanaian languages. So we have lots of languages in Ghana, I think over 72 plus languages. I, as a person, only speak like 2 languages, of course, in addition to English, but then Tree is not my mother tongue, but then it doesn't mean that you don't have text in English. You don't meet people who only speak Tree and can't speak English. Now, these language translation tools, they've built a language translation tool, which they call Kaya. The Kaya app, you can find it on Google Play Store, and you can download and actually play with it and even give some feedback on how they can improve the system. Another problem is that data sets are really hard to come by, and they've been able to source data sets, Ghanaian languages data sets, which they have made freely available. So if you're a machine learning engineer that wants to go into NLP or play with Ghanaian or building AI-based chatbots that are in local languages, these are things that could as well help. So these are a few things that I want to touch on that is particular to our Ghanaian context, which I think are leading or already taking charge when it comes to AI. So I hope this answers the question.
So we're going on a short break to resolve the issue and then come back. So participants are taking a snack break.
We can do it. Okay. Let me tell the Deborah we are coming back. Okay. Give us 10 minutes. All right. It's not like this. Rachel, you want?
Yeah, I'll just say.
But the mics will go. The mic doesn't work. Yeah. No one. Thank you. Yes. That's amazing. Yes, we can go ahead.
We can go.
Okay, there are no mics. Okay, sure.
All right, well, welcome back and thank you all for your patience. So just before we went, we were talking about the frontier of AI application and then some of the gaps as well. So I think we're pretty much done with that. So we're going to move on to the role that equitable AI plays in advancing AI work in Ghana. And I think that's something we're very concerned with, that how equitable is the AI that we're developing. So let me start with you, Doc. So what role does it play? And how important is it in the first place?
Okay, so if we have been following the discussions about AI, we are beginning to see that AI is kind of replicating the inequality that we already have in our society, or is even widening the gap. So when we talk about equitable AI, we want an AI that is fair, that brings about fairness, that brings about equality, that doesn't make the life of people less soft than they are. And so to bring about equitable AI, we need regulation, we need governance. And in Ghana, there's at the national level, they are now trying to come up with policy on AI governance. If we don't have these policies, we will not be able to make the best out of AI. We are going to have a situation where people who are rich get richer, or we have a situation where women or marginalized people who are already in very precarious situation will have their condition being worse because they don't have access. We have, when we take the gender digital divide, we have a situation where a lot of women and a lot of people in marginalized societies do not have access or are not literate in computing and all that. So with the introduction of AI, when it's not done properly, we are going to have these people, even if you have a good technology, for instance, you bring about a technology that can help farmers to detect pests, right? And women do not have are not literate in AI or are not literate in IT, they will not be able to benefit from that technology. So it's always very important that as we think about bringing AI, we also think about how we will make it equitable, how we will make it benefit everybody in society.
So Selassie, Dr. Udo mentions that we need to look at the policy and governance side of things so that we can actually have policies that make that possible. It's interesting because in real life, as opposed to AI, we don't even have policies that are actually favoring or that are removing that bias. So are we expecting to skip that step and then suddenly make it work with AI when we can't actually just even make it work in the very simple stuff?
So talking from a perspective of the statistical institutes where we are supposed to gather and then inform on statistics, I would say it's not just a policy and a governance, but it has to do with the baseline data of which the policies are developed. Because if, let's say, you run, for instance, this analysis was run using the DHS, where assets were not well defined within that data set, or was taken but they're not defined to suit certain genders. Yeah, based your policy on it, it's going to generate a result that is skewed towards a particular gender than the other. So first of all, we must take it from the data point of view, where whatever data we are using to run these models or as input into the AI would be fit for purpose, first of all, well-defined, so that anyone who takes the data knows that these are exactly the parameters under which these data sets were collected, and then make sure that we model that as part of the algorithm before they generate the results. Because if the fundamental data being used is wrong, the policy and then the governance might not work.
I get that. So just let me ask you guys, the lights are back on. Do we want to move or do we want to stay? All right. Thank you so much for that, Selassie. Let me come to you, Deborah. I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on the role that equitable AI will play in advancing AI work in Ghana. And would you like to share them with us?
Yeah, sure. And welcome back from the break too. Okay, all right. So I think that equitable AI, we can think about this as more as fair AI that is ensuring that nobody is being discriminated based on their gender, their race, or ethnic group, or whatever it is, right? And so I think that if we are able to develop AI that is equitable, then we are going to ensure that everybody is treated fairly across. Though in research-wise, we do not have a universal definition of fairness, but that will play from one context to the other. But in this circumstance, let's just say that equitable here ensures that we don't want to discriminate anyone based on their gender, race, or whatever. So I think what is going to help is to build trust. When we started building machine learning models, the idea is that with models, they do not have emotions, and so it would be hard for them to discriminate. But mostly these ML models are built from data, and we as human beings are the ones that produce the data. And so what ML models just do is try to model the trend of the data set that we cannot just see from a human perspective, but ML models are able to work on a large scale quickly and able to identify the trends in them. So what happens is that when we deal with data sets we have produced, which are biased, we only present these to ML models that tend to perpetuate the existing bias in our society. But if we're able to build systems that are equitable, it's going to help build trust. Coming to the local context, I think currently in Ghana, we have selection for BEC, we have WASI selection for high schools. And sometimes there are some parents who are well known and they can go to some institutions and say that, I want you to give my ward admission into your school. And because the parent is influential, it happens that the ward is able to get into the university. in as much as whether this person actually meets all the requirements to be there or not. But with equitable AI, we're going to ensure that these things are going to be broken. Why am I using this example? Because in the UK, during the COVID time, the students, they had to use they build an AI model that predicted which students should go to some particular university. They predicted their scores. And they noticed that students who actually went to more local or let's say, local community schools that were sort of not like rich base tend to be predicted with lower scores, even if these students were going to be very good, right? So that means that this has been a trend that has been happening based on the scores that they have had in previous years. So in our local context, if we're able to come up with equitable AI, we'd be able to also not experience situations like this and help mitigate some of these problems. Aside that, I think another thing would be long-term sustainability. We want to ensure that we're able to sustain whatever measures or new technologies that we put in. And with equitable AI, we'll be able to achieve this and also ensure inclusivity, because in the sense that you wouldn't only have some particular category of people going to a particular institution in the education sector or having access to some particular type of resources. So I think that with equitable AI, these are some of the benefits that we could reap as a country if we are able to achieve equitable AI in that sense. Thanks.
Right, thank you so much. Dr. Sayers, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I just would like to emphasize that in addition to the onus that's on policymakers and people who are using AI, I hope that all of this can help educate us as consumers of data and consumers of policy briefs to help us consider maybe what's going on behind the scenes, whether the data is biased, whether the algorithms being used to understand the impacts of programs and policies might be biased, and hopefully it can improve us as consumers as well.
Right, okay. Well, thank you for that. Hello. So let me come to you, Seth. Hello, Seth, are you there? Do we have Seth?
Hello, still there.
Oh, hi, Seth. Hello. All right, so we're moving on to experiences of AI. So we're going to share, some of the things that we've enjoyed about AI and some of the hurdles and stuff. So I just thought I'd start with you. Since you're a part of the research team, what are some of the things about AI that you particularly enjoy?
Yeah, I think in general, AI has so many new applications and ways to leverage it that are always interesting. But really, the best part when it came to this project for me was being able to work with CDD, with partners in country, because we may be experts in AI, but we are not experts in Ghana. And there's always going to be limits to how effective we are going to be at using AI for a specific context without that local in-country partner. And really, like Deborah was getting at, that gets the sustainability of these projects as well. Being able to work with organizations like CDD and GSS, who will maybe be able to learn from our initial work here and then build on this to have sustainable, long-term, equitable AI applications within Ghana that are run by organizations within Ghana is really the long-term goal and what this project is hopefully starting to facilitate. So that's really interesting to me. I'm always looking forward towards how we can make AI a sustainable, real impact on the world, not just a short-term research project.
Right, okay, well, Dr. Udo, what's about you? What's have your experiences been like with AI?
Yeah, so I think AI is good. It depends on how it's being regulated. And personally, working in deprived community where students have difficulty accessing a lot of things, I see AI holding a lot of potential. For instance, we all know about this generative AI, ChatGPT, and a lot of people are using it. And so as a lecturer, I see it as helping some of these students who naturally do not even have a library system, but with just their phone, they're able to at least do some basic. So for me, I think AI has been very helpful. And yeah.
Okay, so my concern is this, right? When you talk about students in deprived areas, maybe students who actually don't have classrooms, or who are sitting under trees and who don't have phones. Is that not the risk that the AI will actually make the divide larger between those who have accessibility and those who don't have accessibility? Because sometimes it feels like the world is moving forward. If you have a phone, if you have a laptop, you're fine. But if you don't have a phone and you don't have a laptop and you don't have all of that, then you're like stuck in 1,000 years behind. So how are we, going to, as much as it's good, how do we make that divide smaller?
Yeah, so that is one thing that I'm much concerned about. So anytime we are designing AI, we are thinking that, so I'm not an engineer, but I work with the engineers who work with the data. I'm interested in who is behind that data. Because if you have some gender stereotype or you have some biases, for instance, if you are in Ghana and then you have some biases about people within Volta region or people within Northern region, if you are getting the data, you are more likely to introduce that bias. So for instance, if you ask the AI that I need a head porter, the AI, based on the bias that you have fed that data, the data will just say, go to the Northern region or go to some. So these are some of the biases. So mostly we are interested, we don't want to let people project the biases that they have. We don't also want AI to widen the gender inequality gap or the inequality gap that exists within the country. So anytime any technology is being introduced, we want to see that it brings about equity. It brings about fairness within the regions. So if there is a region or there is a population that is marginalized or doesn't have that, we need to have the systems. We need to have we need to do the extra thing for them. So if there's a community that doesn't even have schools, that doesn't even have electricity, we need to start from that point, and then we can also give them that technology. Because at the end of the day, we don't want a situation whereby only children in Kumasi, in Accra, are benefiting from AI, but the child who is in the very deepest village in Ghana also is able to benefit from that.
AI directly. Yeah. Salasi, do you want to share your experiences with us on using AI?
My experience with AI, it has been a sweet experience.
Oh, okay.
The bitter part is more about let me start with the sweet part because the sweet part is more of the results that the AI generates. It's very interesting, it's colorful, it gives you insights that you don't expect to see. And then sometimes you don't even have data, you have small data, but then it extends it over a large area and it gives you an inclusive result. Now, the bitter part is working for a statistical institute. Anything you generate has to be validated. And the validation process is where the headache comes because now it has to justify that as against previous trends and studies that has been collected. Sometimes you get everything right, you feel everything is okay, then just one variable will just sway everything off and then tell you you have to start everything all over again. Yeah, but then I think it's more of a learning experience where you know that certain variables might play well within a certain sector. And then in certain areas you have to adjust. And talking as a spatial analyst, we have much challenge because most of, let me say, things like localities and how people settle or human activities are not well governed or, let me say, not well regulated. So someone can stand up today, set up a community somewhere. You think it's just a few people staying there. Within 2 months, you realize it has turned into a whole estate. And then we've taken data for that same area, say maybe these people are, let me say, within this poverty range, but then within a few months, you have a whole range of rich people moving there. And then it distorts whatever you have. Yeah, so that has been my experience dealing with results from AI. It's always been back and forth, but it's a good learning experience.
Yeah. So how many of us here are using some sort of AI, ChatGPT? Okay, are you enjoying it? Oh, wow, okay. How many of you used it for like your CV or your resume? Yes? You use it for what? Your CV. I used it for my CV too. When I finished, I read it, I was like, wow. So I guess that's the good side, and that's just by the way.
And I have a question.
Yeah, we'll open the floor for questions. So if you just write down your question so that you don't forget. Deborah, let me come to you. So your experiences with AI so far?
Okay, so I'd say that I've been mostly in the field for quite a while, since 2017, maybe not as much as some of the people in here. But then I think I started mostly with trying to understand how these systems work, the mathematics behind them, and then going forward to using Python to build my own models. And then before I started also getting accustomed to actually using some of their existing ones. And one of the AI tools that I often use a lot before ChatGPT is Quillbot, which allows you to paraphrase and summarize sentences. So you write a long text and you put it there, and it's able to paraphrase. And mostly I like it because I'm able to, they give me some words that synonyms that I could just replace with the sentences that I've used and all of that before ChatGPT came into the picture. The other ones that I think the experience has been very, very good because I love to travel a lot. And recently I was in Strasbourg in France, and we're trying to get to a cathedral. And usually sometimes with the Google Maps, you just put the location, they say 10 left, 10 right. And with my phone, sometimes I have to turn the phone to know whether it's left this way or right. But now they have this live view that you just raise the phone up and then you turn it around the buildings, then they tell you exactly where you are. And then you have an arrow that automatically points like, okay, turn this way or turn that way. And this, I find it to be very, very amazing. So I would say some of these things for me, using AI has been tremendous. But on the other hand, I think I've sometimes been very, very disheartened with investigating how these systems as well sort of exhibit bias, certain race, certain gender, and all of that. Currently, I think Bloomberg made this very nice research on data bias where, so it's on generative AI. So they actually wanted to show that generative AI systems are really biased. And trust me, if you see the results, you'd be amazed. The idea is that you just select that, okay, can you show me people who are, let's say like prisoners? And trust me, you see results of a particular race alone, that they've identified that it has generated images of people who are prisoners. You say it should generate images of storekeepers. It generates most of them as like Black American female, lots of them. So it's like, it's passing on some stereotypes. And this generative AI, they generate the images, all right, but when you look at the images, you know that it's just targeting a particular race. And for me, these are certain things that I find disheartening. Aside that ChatGPT in particular, I use ChatGPT as well, but then there are times that sometimes you ask it a question, maybe you are debugging a code, then you ask it, and then it gives you some very confident answer that, okay, I think I made an error. You were supposed to put a colon here. Then the next moment you are like, are you sure? Then you say, I'm sorry that I think that what you said is true. Then it automatically sometimes repeats the same thing for you. So it's like, it's being confidently, wrongfully confident. And this for me is going to mislead lots of people, especially if you are dealing with it and you can't verify whether these results are actually right or wrong. So in as much as my experience using AI tools have been very useful and have helped me in various aspects of my life, I wouldn't also want to just stand on the point that we shouldn't also be cautious when we are using these systems, because when it comes to bias, it's a serious issue that we need to pay attention to. So that's all I have to add to this.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, she talks about being in France and standing in front of a cathedral and finding her way. Do you think that if we did that in Adobe, she would be able to find our way and navigate through? I don't know how many of you have gotten lost in the market, so that would definitely be interesting. If you could, I'm going to ask my last question so that I can have more of an audience engagement. And then if we have more time, then I'll continue with my question. So this one is for you, Selassie. What data sources do you think are the most useful for AI applications, and how available is this data?
Okay, so data sources that I would say are reliable for AI modeling is data coming from our statistical institutes, because I think they have had years of experience and extensive work in gathering data. They've shown their capacity to overcome those biases and then understand the data dynamics. Yeah, but then as to whether that data is available for the public, the answer is no. So most models currently implemented are using open source data that are not authoritative and having been validated by, let me say, using experts inputs. Okay. Where they have had experience in training data, understanding the biases, and being able to identify errors within those data sets. So one thing I was discussing with your colleagues is there is a probability that we are feeding the current AI models who are developing wrong data or data with a lot of errors. And at the end of the day, once you integrate these models with correct data, you might then see the correct data as wrong because you've been trained on error. And then in some way, somehow, the AI is not able to differentiate between what is wrong data and what is correct data. Yeah, so that's my perspective.
That's you. Dr. Peter, can I put you on the spot? So, I mean, we're talking about available data, but I want to ask you about true data. So, for example, in your presentation, it said that 2022, most like 39, 40, 50-year-old women have had 2 sexual partners in their lifetime. And that's the data, 2 or 3 partners, 2 point something. I don't know what the point something. Oh, okay, so let's make it. So, okay, let's say, you know, women up to like 49 years old have had 3 sexual partners in their lifetime. This is the available data. Is it true? Like, okay, let me ask you guys.
You know, normally data that we put out there like is aggregates or to take the average. If we have gone further, maybe have it by urban, rural, okay, or by regional variations, or age groups in certain areas, you will see the variations. Yeah, and as Selassie was talking about, we always turn out official statistics. Statistics from official. Okay. Statistics from national statistical institutions are classified as what? Official, because they are validated. You can't just, you should be in a position to defend it. Okay. So how you even collected the data must be explained to the general public. The challenge, as he mentioned, for instance, now people, because of AI, people even request for GPS coordinates of where people live. And by Data Protection Authority or Commission's conditions, you can't do that. Yeah. So that's where you find it difficult to draw the line between, as you said, the true data and what is available to the general public. So if you want statistics from Ghana Statistical Service, for instance, some of these things will be not shared. Okay. But somebody who will go out and get that.
Okay, so let me take your question. So that, okay, hello, yes, please. Please tell us your name, where you're from, and then your question. Right. And who you are asking the question to.
Thank you very much. My name is Nkrumah. I work for Concern Health, also a member of the Ghana Coalition of State Health. My question goes to all the researchers, including those on Zoom. It borders on the following: regulation, standard, security, exploitation, and the reality on the ground. So what is the advice when it comes to regulation? What is the standards in terms of security? Are we to be afraid of the AI that we use? Are we going to be exploited for the AI that we use? And the findings that is coming, which is projecting the bias, is that the reality on the ground? And so, moving forward, what is the way forward? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you like to start? Okay.
Yeah. So this issue of standard and regulation is something that even came up at the first ever African AI conference in Kigali. And so the discussion is that we don't have regulations. Let's get regulations in place so that people don't abuse the citizens or the population. But then on the other hand, other people are also saying that, what are we regulating? Because if we don't know what, we are trying AI, but most of us don't even know exactly like what we are really doing. So what are we even going to regulate at the first place? So others are suggesting that let's keep trying. And as we keep trying, we'll get to know that, okay, we have to regulate this way, we have to regulate this way. Else, if we bring in regulation before innovation, we are going to have a situation where people are going to be put in a box. People are not able to actually come up with innovation because the regulations were built on things that don't exist or were taken from elsewhere. Countries that have already tried have come up with their regulations. We just go and pick them and come into a setting. It's not going to work. So that discussion is ongoing. But what is being advised is that whatever you are doing, you have to be very ethical. That's why every research that you are doing, you go through some ethical clearance. So these ethical things, you think about data privacy and like Doc said, you have to think about all these privacy issues. So as a country like Ghana, we are exploring, but we don't need to have this something that we cannot, like a law. I personally also think that we don't really need a law at the moment, but we need some guiding policies that can help us, regulate us as we are coming up with these innovations. And on the issue of the biases, whether it's a reality or not, it's actually a reality because a lot of studies have shown that because of the way the data was collected, it tended to also come up with some biases, which reflects what we have in our society. So one of the studies I want to even share had, they wanted to check on the credit rating of men and women. And so the data was collected on only men. So it made it look like women, again, in our society, it made it look like women, when it comes to loans, they cannot go for big loans, they cannot. And so when women applied for loans, they are not using, they use the AI to evaluate it. And it actually evaluated the men higher than the women. But in reality, when they check, the men that they have rated higher are people who are owing loans elsewhere. Meanwhile, these women who were rated lower, they were better off. And so these are biases that are there. You can, if people have even applied for schools, if the AI was trained with a model with just white people, if you're a Black person and you apply, the system will automatically reject you because it didn't have representation from your population. And so it's likely to reject you. So the biases and all the things, it's actually the reality. We have gender inequality in our society. And you see that this AI is also replicating some of them. Because one, the person who is even doing the coding is biased. If you put a man or if you put somebody who is biased behind the computer, whatever the person will model will also be biased. And so so the biasness doesn't just start with the final product. It starts from how the data was collected and how the model was designed. If the data collection is wrong, the model, everything is also going to be biased. That is why we are interested in having more regulation ethics to ensure that whatever design, whatever innovation you are coming up with doesn't bring about inequality or doesn't tend to put some people in a worse situation.
Okay, so lastly, and if any of our panelists would like to answer the question, I mean, you can always just go ahead. Okay, can I go to Deborah? Okay, Deborah, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so about the question, so I'm gonna start from the first. I think one of the questions was about if we should be scared about security-wise. So I would just say that first of all, I think that we have different industrial revolutions that have happened. We have the first industrial revolution that happened. Now we are like in the fourth industrial revolution. And usually at every revolution, there's always this fear and panic among people like, oh, this is going to take away our jobs. People are not going to have jobs again. We used to have messengers. We used to have typewriters. But later there was this emergence of building personal computers, and it made it easy for everyone to sit at the comfort of their home and type. So first, with security-wise about jobs or anything of that sort, I would say that we don't necessarily have to be scared, but you need to know that you would only have to upgrade your skill, right? Because back in the days, typewriting used to be a job, but now we have, let's say, data analysts. You just have to think about improving yourself and your skills so you can be relevant for the job market, because there are several jobs that will be created in the process of AI taking place or doing certain things, but doesn't mean that there are certain roles that wouldn't also be created. So in as much as jobs will be lost, new jobs will be created, you only need to get the requisite skills to fit in those particular jobs. With a question on biasness, I should say this is a very hot topic. It's a reason why the research community actually came up with a conference that is just targeted at this. So usually in machine learning, most of the big conferences are like neural information processing conferences, NURBS. We have ICML, we have ICLR, and usually these are all like general conference areas where people submit different topics in machine learning or computer science. But later they noticed that, okay, it's important that we have a community, a dedicated community that is just focused on fairness, biasness, and that conference is ACM FACT. So it's for fairness, accountability, transparency. These things, though they always seem like, oh, you have people who are working on them independently, but they seem to still be connected. And the reason why we have noticed that this is important is that earlier we used to focus mostly on, I want to build a machine learning model that does this, and we are focused just on accuracy. So, and accuracy, we all understand accuracy just calculates, okay, how many true positives did I get? That's like, you got a prediction positive and the actual label was also positive, and then which prediction was negative and the actual label is also negative. So we put these together and sum over the total number of predictions we made. So we used not to focus on how does the accuracy even perform between groups. And later on, after Timonit Gebru and some other researchers really went into investigating some existing machine learning systems, they found out that these systems were biased. And research has continued to show that, yes, most of these systems that we build are biased. And we still do that in the community in Ghana, the machine learning community in Ghana. When you speak to most people, the main focus is on how well their model performs. But the question is that when you follow up and you ask, okay, so how are you ensuring for fairness? How do you do your reweighting? Because when you're building a system, aside the data that can be biased, in the model development stage, I as a machine learning engineer can also incorporate some form of bias, because what we are doing in machine learning is just to optimize weight. And whilst I'm optimizing weight, I want those weights that would give me the best model. I can incorporate some form of bias by noticing that optimizing the model with respect to some particular weight give me highest accuracy, but then it tends to hurt some particular race or gender or whatever sensitive attributes it is. So literally most of us are not privy to the fact that these systems can have negative consequences. And so we always just focus on the accuracy performance. And so right now there's so much work all over the place, day in, day out. I keep seeing new papers on fairness and how we can ensure that we mitigate the bias. When you come down to Europe about policies, Europe, for instance, just in, I think April 2023, they came up with this Artificial Intelligence Act. And with the Artificial Intelligence Act, they identify or put different risk levels. So they had the unacceptable risk, the high risk, limited risk, and minimal risk. So if you are building systems that are unacceptable risk, it's prohibited. You don't have to build such a system in Europe. So they mention like surveillance, like also like if you are collecting people's images. So these things are things that the continent has itself sat down. There are lawyers that have also come in to design things that can help protect their people. I'm not saying it's perfect. It's still their local, their continent context. But then when we come to the Ghanaian context, the African context, there are certain things that also matter to us. And that's why the field of ethics is a very delicate topic, because there are certain things as a northerner, I would find that this is ethical to do. Then you speak to someone who is from a different African country and this is not ethical for them, or they find that it's okay, either you want to do it or you don't do it. But for us, it's a different thing. So for example, religion is one thing that we as Ghanaians hold paramount. But when you come to the Western world, it's not something that is so much of, I'm not saying it's not, but it's, as much as we hold so much to a high esteem, it's not comparatively. So when we have to develop our own policies, we need to now put into our local context, what does it mean? And our main prerogative should be, how do we protect our people? How do we protect their data? If I am a machine learning engineer and I use data sets of people, how long do I keep that data set? Where can I publish whatever result I come out of it with that result that I come with? These things should all be laid out, but it can't be done with one party. We need a collaborative effort. So educators, researchers, industry persons, students, everybody's voice needs to be heard, because at the end, it's supposed to serve the whole community. So you need to ensure that you put in different voices in place. But I do believe that it's about time. I know that they have this AI African policy that is currently being designed. And I think it's important that we as a continent really focus on this, because in the next few years, when we would all go into huge development of AI for ourselves, these policies will need to guide us in a way. And we need to start now. We don't have to see the negative consequences of them before we now begin to say that we are designing policies. So I think that generally, you don't have to be scared about jobs. You can learn and upgrade your skill. Yes, the biases are real, but then there are several research that have shown how to mitigate them. It wouldn't just solve them, but at least you are cautious of it. You are aware that this exists and you try to put in effort. And I think the findings from this paper from AID and CDD-Ghana already seeks to establish that this exists and people should be cautious about that. And with the policies, everybody is involved. We all play a role in it, and we should all take a part in speaking on why we need a policy and how we can bring in different voices to be heard in dealing with these things. So that's what I have to say in addressing this question.
Thank you, Deborah. Should we go to another question? Did you want to? No? Oh, okay. So do I have any more questions?
Yes, I was going to ask that. Laura was saying jobs are going to be lost and jobs are going to be gained. I'm sure that Dr. Udo in her work has come across Saarland's chart of how to bring women on board, welfare, access, conscientization, and finally when you are able to gather all these things to become a resourceful woman. Obviously, we are lagging behind in terms of this IE and its application for women, if you like. And in the presentation that the gentleman also had, you can see clearly that there are some disparities regarding how IE is assessed, AI is assessed by women. How are we going to involve and leverage on this latent development so that when jobs are lost, women will not be affected? If there's any work at all you've done regarding that aspect.
So the issue with
jobs being lost because of AI. Deborah has gone a little bit in that, like jobs are not really going to be lost. They are only going to be refined. For instance, let's say there was this picture going around that AI build my house for me.
Yeah.
Impossible. So there are certain things that AI cannot do. AI has certain limitations. AI doesn't have emotions.
Okay, but also, sorry, but also that in that part of the world where, for instance, when it goes to ministries, certain categories of women occupy the front or receptionists.
Yeah.
And if AI is inculcated in such ministries, these old women, including my mother, for instance, will be out of job. So what I'm saying is that how do you entice certain groups of women to be adopt this new trend development as we move forward?
Yeah, so I'm building the story. Yeah, so like I said, there are certain things that we cannot replace. AI, for instance, also doesn't have emotions. So if you put an AI to somebody who has been abused, AI will it doesn't understand. And so that you still need human beings. AI is only here to help humans work efficiently, not to replace them. Now, coming to the gender issue, in our society, we already know we have this gender divide. And so if we are introducing any technology, since we know that we have this problem, we always have to take the step in rectifying that. That is why we don't only think about, let's introduce AI. We have to think about a holistic social change approach, where we are thinking about promoting a lot of education for women, granting people access to resources, granting, even if there are people who are not computer literate, how are we going to empower these people? So we have basic classes that can help these people catch up. So bringing AI, it's not just that we bring AI and everybody gets it. There are people who are not going to get it. It's going to start from our educational system, even our society. How are we even incorporating it? So we have policies that will promote uptake of technology. We always talk about this STEM. All these AIs that are being developed, if you go in and you look at the percentages of the developers, I'm happy to see people like Deborah come in. We only have few women. And if we don't have women, people will say that when I was speaking with the engineers, some of the engineers, they'll tell me, whatever I'm doing is gender neutral, everybody will benefit. I said, no. Why do I still have to have a woman on the board? People don't understand. The engineers feel that what I'm doing is benefiting everybody. Why do I need to have a woman engineer? And I keep telling them that the way we see things is different from the way other people see things. So it's always important that we have diversity in the team that is even coming up with the intervention. Okay, so as we have this type of diverse things, we think about the various challenges from our different backgrounds, from the different people like disabled people. Imagine AI is here, somebody is blind. How is a person going to access AI? So when we think about AI, we are thinking about all these marginalized people in our society. How can we, if there is something, how can we bring in extra help for these people to catch up so they can get the full benefits of the technology? So for women, the women issue, it's not only the AI, it's even in access to resources. A lot of women don't even have smartphones. Now, access to phone is high, but a lot of them don't have smartphones. How do they get smartphones? You can only get them if they're economically empowered. If you're economically empowered, then you can be able to buy a smartphone. So the solution is an integrated one where we look at different aspects of our society and then come up with solutions that will bring a progressive good for the entire society.
But from everything that you've said, some jobs will be lost because like your mother, for example.
Well, so then we must stay slowly, if you like. Or would you agree in the application of this AI, whatever?
Yeah.
So Sephora talked about the typewriter system. Previously, if you wanted to type something, you needed to go and see a typewriter. Someone to do that. But these people have transformed, and now they are also taking, they've learned the yeah, so those people are still there.
Thank you.
Yes,
So you see, I am worried, not because probably my mother's job will be affected. We are living in a society where finding jobs is difficult. And we are trying to adopt a technology that we are laggards already in this area. And we want to kind of apply it by force, if you like. Is there a way we can do things slowly so that we may not be choked somewhere? And then in the end, we better hear again and see how do we slow down AI or AI, or, you know.
It's very true. This when you go to developed countries, for a very long time, they were not giving money. When you go to the bank, you don't have to go and give the money to the teller. You do it at the ATM. But we were very slow in taking up that, because once we do that, a lot of bank tellers were going to be displaced. But we took a very long time before we started introducing, because we know by then a lot of people have gained other skills. So the same way with AI, we are not just taking the whole thing. That's why people like Professor Jai Ponyo are talking about Afrocentric-led AI, Afrocentric data, where we look at our situation and come up with solutions that will help us. So it's not like this thing has been done here, so we need to do that. Yeah.
Transition.
Yes, so it's something that is very gradual. We are looking at our own problems. We have some of the things that we are using AI to solve in Ghana are not things that the people in the West are using. Like Darlington, this maternal health and all that. The people in the West are not doing that, but it's something that is meeting our current need. With this, with the introduction of these technologies, a lot of maternal deaths have been reduced. We have a situation where the ratio of patient to doctor is very wide. Yes, and so with the introduction of AI in the health sector like this, we have certain things that you don't have to go and queue. Once you take your X-ray, and then the AI can at least look at it, give you something. When you go to the doctor, you won't need to spend a lot of time. So we are doing it at our own pace. We are not following anybody that these people have done. We are using AI. That is why we talk about equitable AI. We want AI that will solve our problem. We don't want an AI that will finish and we cannot even use it. So AI, like you said, then that fear is a real fear, but these are some of the things that we are not taking AI to sectors that do not necessarily need it, right? There are sectors like diseases in plants. Farmers are always losing their crops because of pests and diseases, because of climate change. When they plant, they are expecting the rains never come. So how do we use AI to solve some of these things?
And of course, our presidency, the AI is to choose the president.
Yeah, I think, did you, Salati wanted to make a comment, or should I go to the
just to add on to AI is not going to, it's going to take jobs, but not to really.
I like the fact that you keep saying it will, but then you come back to reverse.
So the fact is, AI enhances what you do, but then it doesn't take away the fun expertise and the emotional part. Yeah, so as much as, let's say, an AI has been able to determine that data, and these are the possible solutions, you still need a human being there with that experience to make the final validation of what has to be done and what let me say, recommendations or the conclusions have to be taken based on the results. Yeah, so yeah, it will still be needed for. Yeah.
Okay, you say so. Let me go to the gentleman at the back. Your name, please, and where you are.
I just have two questions, but just before that, I want to just comment on one. Yeah, African continent have missed out on almost all the conditions. Yeah. Simply because we are always waiting for the best time. So we miss out on the industrial revolution. What one is the AI? We are not careful. Actually, that we have to enter then we are going to be lost almost forever. And that might be the reason why we have always been the top. So that's just that. But I would like to ask the presenter, the main presenter.
Dr. Says.
You kind of like associated, kind of like map clusters of geospatial data and related it to households, and you generated those kind of poverty maps. I'm just confused. How are you able to link it with individual households? Because they are clusters. Was it that for each cluster, you look at households within a cluster and then map whatever find in terms of access to roads and those kind of other, community-based log variables on? Secondly, whilst we have acknowledged that there are biases, for example, the male-headed households or male households also are overestimated compared to the DHS data when you do it manually using the AI. These biases, what do they mean? Is it good or bad? What were we expecting when we started the investigations? Because just saying that it is overestimated or underestimated, for me, really, I don't know what it means. Were we expecting it to have done it almost accurately about the magnitudes?
Those are both great questions. I'll start with the first one about the clusters. So one of the limitations of the DHS data, as you point out, is that the location is only available for the whole cluster. So that means we do have to aggregate it. So we know the wealth of the individual household, but we only know the location of the cluster. And even the cluster is displaced a little bit to protect the anonymization of the individuals who answer the survey. So for that reason, everything then has to be kind of aggregated to the cluster level, and we can't map it back to the individual households. So then when we think about predicting the poverty, we're predicting the poverty of so still a small area, but we wouldn't be predicting it of the individual households. That's something we can't do without data that we can't access. And then for the second question, so thinking about this wealth index and kind of, it's hard to say whether it's good or bad, because like you said, how would you weight assets? I mean, I know what I own in my house, but how do I weigh that? What's most important to wealth compared to what someone else might choose to buy? There's no one right answer. But what I will say is that it concerns me that we weight the assets the same across all subpopulations. We know that a woman, if she has more wealth, she might invest it in other ways than men. So maybe my best way to make money with the wealth I have is by buying a sewing machine and starting a sewing business. Whereas perhaps for a man, it's investing in a motorbike. So there's differences in these ways. So it does concern me that the weighting would be uniform across those. And what concerns me more is that comparing the female-only weighted asset index to the generalized one, we think that the generalized one in comparison is making poor female households look wealthier than the female one does. So what that tells me is that there could be the potential that by using these kind of aggregate weights, we're missing the poorest women because we're kind of evaluating them by the standards of the entire community rather than by the standards of women. And so that's why it concerns me. But again, we can't say, is it, definitively, is it good or bad? Because I don't know what the true, real, good weighting of assets is. It does concern me. I don't know if Seth, if you would like to add anything to that.
No, I think that was a great description of where we are. And I think we're really just dependent on better data and better ground truthing of household wealth levels.
All right, well, thank you. Kojo, does that answer your question?
To some extent.
Well, we thank God for that. You have a follow-up question.
Yes, so I want to know, aside the random forest, did you try other models? And if you did, what were the indicators for your selection of the random forest?
Seth's our AI expert, so I'll let him take
For this project, we've specifically used random forest based on previous experiments, just because we know random forests are easier to implement and more interpretable. And we wanted the work we did here to be something that others could pick up and build on. So previously, we've used more complex deep learning methods like convolutional neural networks that are actually teaching the computer how to look at imagery rather than just us feeding it specific data points. So we could feed it satellite imagery and it would learn from the imagery what features are related to wealth. Those are much more complex to implement and train and take a lot more time and computational resources to run. So random forests were really a good selection for this. There are other machine learning AI algorithms that we could explore that we haven't, that are simpler than the deep learning models, but different than random forest. But random forests are a very well established and sort of generally accepted model for these type of applications.
Right, okay. Does that answer it?
Okay, for as a statistician, like going in for something based on easy interpretation doesn't really
satisfy your spirit,
because you have to produce different ways. Tell us, let's say, the precision of these models, how accurate they are, and the advantages aside it being easy to interpret, so that we know that, okay, for whatever model that we built using, let's say, the random forest or the other alternative that we mentioned, we could say that, okay, this is a better model than this due to, let's say, the precision, the recall, or the weight, as Deborah mentioned. So I think moving forward, we should try other alternatives and give us the results from these models for us, the audience, to appreciate. Then we can take a better decision from there. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that. Okay, so let's move on. Questions? Yeah.
Wanted to raise up. With regards to an acceptable AI tomorrow, as I say, we have AI. We are having content about the bias now. Gender itself, the role of gender in African diaspora or in Africa really is subject, because we still have issues related to gender in Africa that has been dealt with here. Specifically in Ghana, we only have few feminists or women activists in Ghana. Now, with regards to the team you were saying now for the technicians setting up the AI, yeah, you said you always would vie for a lady to be on board. Now, having a lady on board wouldn't actually solve the problem of the gender bias, because you could have a lady on board, but she might not be a woman activist. Yeah, she herself could be biased, because Ghana, as of now, we still have a problem with the people gender role and then how they are moving back. With regards to the Western world, and then where they are now, you can say that they are far advanced, and then the lady over there usually do have an upper hand with regards to issues for settlers. So why don't we, let's say, take it from a step, let's find the roots to our gender issues and then try changing this mindset about gender biasness we have now. Then later from that side, we would turn our attention to a better AI for us tomorrow. Why don't
Okay, I'm sorry, before you come in, I think your colleague also mentioned the same thing about the fact that if we don't fix the input, then there's no way that we can expect a better output. Do you want to comment on that before Dr. Kwame?
I think the breakout point was when you were sharing your limitations. So the point was that we are gathering data and there are issues before the data. AI is good. We train the model. Let me give you a classical example. When you want to take money, you go to the ATM, you punch whatever you want, like money comes out. Have you asked yourself who feeds that ATM with the money? It's a human being, right? So if the human being mess anything within that process, the whole thing we have done is fundamentally wrong. So why not get to the point where, okay, we know that these are the issues within our continent or within Ghana. What do we decide that we want? Then we all agree that, okay, we are going to approach AI However, we wanted to produce XYZ. Because we wanted to produce XYZ, we are moving with this data set. So that when we realize it, then we know that indeed we ourselves fed it to perform certain tasks the way they are performing. Else, if we alienate our social science issues from the technology and leave it to the data scientists and the computers and the statisticians, we would sit in this room and have same conversations over and over and over and over. I've sat in more than, I think, 4 AI communications. And when I sit back, I'm very quiet because then I don't get anybody sharing what I want to see or hear them share. Because the broad problem is that we've got the way we've built our cultures, right? AI is a machine. We want to tell the machine, do this for me. So you are taking everything to the machine. Now, responsibly, how do you tell the machine to do what you want? So when she was sharing her findings, I was like, well, this is good. It's novel, but it's telling us what we have to look at, not the models. And people who do regression models and all, we've seen them all over. So until we get to that point where he's talking about we addressing that side of gender perspective of things, our models will keep on producing the same. And my question is, at what point do we agree?
And in response to that, if the machine makes a mistake, what is the punishment?
Let me just put everything together. So you said we already have a gender equality issue in our country, and now we are talking about just putting a woman there. That is not really what we do. So one of the trainings I've been having with the engineers is reflex sensitivity, where you have to think about who you are and the biases that you already have. So I'm having a series of these training workshops where we introduce even the term gender, like what do they think, and all these things keep coming up. So when you know what you are, who you are, and the biases that you have, you become conscious when you are designing any innovation. You get it? So it's not just let's put a woman on the team. No, because we also have women who have biases. I was teaching one class and I asked a student, would you like to have a female as a president? She told me, no, I don't want a female. And her reason was simple. I asked her why. She told me women already have a lot of work they have to do in the house. So why do they want to take extra jobs? Wow. So this is someone with this bias. If I put this type of person on that team, she's not going to help anything. So even whoever is on the team want to ensure that you are aware of your own biases, so that you don't, when you are aware of the biases, you are careful that you don't introduce it in whatever model that you are developing, whatever data. But if you have some biases and you want to even collect data, because you want the data to look a certain way, you exclude some people. You exclude some people, but once you are aware of those biases, you are going to include them. Then responding to your question on when the machine makes a mistake, what happens? In our parts of the world, like we said, the regulations, we are now coming up with it. But in advanced societies, people sue them. If it tends to put someone in a very disadvantaged position, or that model or that technology has to be recalled, you have to modify it. I think Deborah can also add something.
No, before that, before Deborah comes in, let me, because there are a few more questions that I want to take. So I feel like, let me do your question.
Yeah, my concern is that change is inevitable, irrespective of how we are going to justify that it will not keep people's job. It is something that will come to pass. AI is not more or less like God, whereby it waits for the judgment day. Once you are human on earth, and you fail to add value to your life, AI will reach you. And perhaps we have something called adoption of innovation. Anytime you are trying to introduce a new policy or a new idea into the system, there are early adopters, there are late majority, and there are laggards. People who have an entrenched position that I don't want to go with the current flow, they are there. Those who want to embrace the idea from the early stage and test it how it works, they are also there. So when you look at AI, it is more or less like an incremental innovation. It is something that has existed, but in a different way. We're not calling it something like AI. If you look at GPT, like it, for instance, when you don't feed in information, you don't get response. So the same thing that we as human beings must think ahead of time, so that we shouldn't consider the fact that once it is not time, we embrace it. It doesn't mean it is not. If you look at, there was a reference to me, telemedicine. It is not trying to reduce the queues that we will face in the hospitals. People don't come to the hospital in person. They can just do consulting online and go there for the prescription. So I believe that irrespective of whether it's difficult time or it is not the right time to embrace it, we need to make sure we adjust ourselves to make sure that things of this nature will come to pass.
Okay. Well, thank you. Our time is up, so can we close?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So I think that's it. Let me give you a minute, maybe a minute each to our panelists to just tell us their closing thoughts. Deborah, let me start with you. Just as we're closing, just in under a minute, what are you hoping for in terms of AI? I'm here in Ghana, especially.
Okay, so I'd say that I think the community, the ML community itself in Ghana is still growing. I'm part of a number of communities that we deal with, helping people who want to get started in machine learning and data science. The Women in Machine Learning and Data Science is one. I'm also part of the Ghana NLP. So if you are curious or interested in getting involved in more on learning about ML technologies or how to develop them, I think being part of communities like this, we can together have discussions and understand how we can contribute to addressing our own local challenges. Also, I wanted to mention that in September, from the 3rd to the 9th, we have the Deep Learning in Daba, which is one of the largest gathering of machine learning engineers, researchers all over Africa who be coming to Accra, Ghana from 3rd to the 9th of September. It's strictly by invitation, and but I just wanted to mention it out. You can search for this online, and next year to be in another African country, but just to keep updated with how the field is progressing in Africa. So, but in all, I think most people are statisticians. Whatever you do, think about how that whatever model you build, how does it affect minority or majority groups in whatever models you build? That's all I have to say. And thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's Deborah Kanubala. She's an ML researcher at Saarland University, Germany. Thank you so much, Deborah, for joining us. So Salafi, your final thought.
So I would say that AI is something that has come to stay. So whether we are done or not, it's like it's come, and then the good we actually adopt is to catch up with the developing or the developed world. On the side of the Statistical Institute, what we are doing is now to generate systematic results from our sense of data and other surveys, so that people can have a base to compare whatever results they have generated from their models, what statisticians who, let me say, are experienced with large data have generated for the entire family. So that's open data that's really available on our website that you can easily access and go into particular areas. So it's easier for you to and then get the results you want and compare with the results of your model. In addition to that, there'll be a hackathon around the various universities, starting from somewhere 28th of this month. So I think in case you have anyone who's in the university who's interested in data and AI, it will basically be run on the census data. So then we can also incite that there's a price tag to it. So in case they are good enough, they can make some sport.
That sounds good. That sounds good. Thank you so much, Selassie. I'm just like,
Yeah, I think my closing thoughts, just as we move towards ethical AI, as we've all talked about, I think it's a multi-pronged approach, looking at the bias in AI, the bias in data, the bias in the everyday lives and the context. And so it's kind of a multi-pronged approach that's going to take a while, but I hope we can move forward with it. I do also want to mention that all of the kind of archives that we use in our research is available on GitHub. So if you would like to look at that, it's available for you to see.
All right, well, thank you. I'm sure you'd be interested in seeing that, wouldn't you? Okay, so I'm just going to take a comment from our online viewers. So Jedediah, you've had your hand up for a really long time. Jedediah, are you there? Going, gone. All right, okay. Doctor, I think you're last to share a comment to that.
Yeah, so I want to end by saying that AI is not going to take our jobs. AI is not going to AI is only going to, if we manage it well, responsibly, then it's going to help us do things more efficiently.
I thank you. Can we give our panelists up? Thank you so much. Let's invite Mavis Domi. She's a research coordinator here at CDD-Ghana for the closing remarks.
It wasn't have been said so much. So, yes, in closing, I'll start from where Richard left. AI is not taking our jobs because we have to actually train them and give them data to make their decisions. So it's about us also evolving with the AI as it evolves. Thank you so much. This has been insightful. It's been great contributions from our discussants as well as you. This is new, yet evolving. We are hoping for more collaborations. We are hoping that these findings can be built on to improve AI efficiency, particularly for our growing world where we are still catching up. And I'm hoping that this conversation we would continue it beyond here. We have a small form I have sent all your emails for you to also just give your views on it and also give feedback on this workshop and what we can do to further advance talking about AI. Thank you so much for spending time, and apologies for the inconvenience with the lights. As soon as we moved there, the lights came on, but we continued. And thank you for your patience and staying true till the end. Thank you so much.
Oh, really? I went to text. I don't know. Not there. I What I remember, you'll give me my number. Sure. Okay, sure. So that's on 459. I'm calling you. Okay, I'll send you a hi. Sure. Yeah. Hello. Thank you, Doc. Oh, okay. That was nice to meet you. Okay. Sure. Right. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.